Following the logical path has often brought people to burnout, to doubting themselves. It's a safer route, we think, to follow someone else's step-by-step plan in order to build a business, scale a business. And I think that's probably the main reason why people struggle to listen to their intuition. The overly structured strategy logical person needs to learn how to trust him, herself more, to be receptive to impulses and letting the voice of the intuition come up louder again. So many people run against the walls, questioning themselves, why it's not happening for me. Why is it always me that where the sales are not coming in? And if you follow your intuition, there's something greater than you that's lifting a lot of obstacles away that you don't even have to worry about certain things.
How do you get people to move into their body and to listen more to their intuition?
The first thing is
Have you ever felt like you are building a business based on somebody else's blueprint rather than what feels authentic to you? My guest today is Liza Leiss. She's a leadership coach that specializes in helping founders to reconnect to their authentic selves and build businesses that give them freedom and fulfillment. Liza has an MBA and has coached hundreds of entrepreneurs, helping them to scale without burning out. We get into a lot of amazing topics today, but the one thing that was most powerful for me was this idea of being able to tap into your intuition and let your intuition guide your business, not in a airy-fairy or spiritual way, but in a very grounded way that allows you to scale and still generate money without sacrificing yourself or your soul. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please hit the subscribe button and share it with a friend. Liza, why do you think so many people struggle to follow their intuition when they're running a business?
I think one of the main reasons is because we haven't learned it another way. We learn to follow a structure. We learn to follow someone else's blueprint. And so it's like the most unnatural thing to follow our intuition. So that's kind of like, it's a safer route, we think, to follow someone else's step-by-step plan in order to build a business, scale a business. And I think that's probably the main reason why people struggle to listen to their intuition, because they don't know how it sounds like.
Do you think we learn that in school as well?
I will say that I believe that in order to be successful, in order to get into university, you have to have a certain grade. So therefore, you must learn a certain way. And I think only after my bachelor, I realized how I should learn in order to be very, very great at my master's. So yeah, I will definitely, say so.
Yeah. So it's almost like there's a point in our life where we have to follow a blueprint in order to get to a certain way. And then you advocate that beyond that, it's very much about trusting your intuition, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think we see different, like there's something happening, I think, in education as well. What I've been noticing, people waking up more or are more interested in raising consciousness. And I think that's ultimately also pushing towards how we can connect to our inner voice and intuition. So yeah, I think there's a change happening. And it was just personally for me like this. There was always an inner voice. So yeah, in business, there was just this feeling of, if I decide to go with this, let's say someone gave me that strategy, it just didn't feel right to me. And I just couldn't follow it because it wasn't my way. And I think that was definitely one of those points where I had to be brave enough to follow the voice of kind of like the pathless path. I had no idea where I was walking.
Do you think there's a difference between the male perception of that and the female perception of that? Do you think it's easier for women, or do you think women's internal voice is louder than men in your experience just through coaching?
I don't think that men are necessarily more distant to their intuition, but there is the conditioning that makes it a bit harder for them to access it in the first place. So I think as if like the obstacle, the hurdle, I don't know, I think that's a bit bigger, but essentially it's the same.
Okay, interesting. So before we get into deconstructing what the hurdles are to this, why is it so important? Like, why are you such a big advocate of people building businesses from their authentic selves, from their heart, and building something that is guided by their intuition versus guided by a blueprint or somebody else's strategy?
So I think both ways work, but there's a difference in how you get to a goal. And if you follow your intuition, there's something greater than you that's lifting a lot of obstacles away that you don't even have to worry about certain things. Yes, you have to build that trust in order to actually stand in it and stay in that lane. But with the other way, what I've seen, so many people run against the walls, questioning themselves, why it's not happening for me. Why is it always me that, I don't know, where the sales are not coming in, And I think there are just two ways. You get to choose what you want. But I think I live once in this like human body. I might as well have fun, and I might as well enjoy it build it in flow. Build it. And flow doesn't necessarily mean that when you follow your intuition, nothing comes up, right? You have to work on everything that life gives you and alchemize it as you move through it. So I think it's not the easy part, because I do think the strategy part could be easier. Or the logical path. Strategy, because intuition is strategy too.
Yeah, that's true. So if we just kind of deconstruct both the positive and the negative, so like, what do people typically experience when they're not following their intuition and they're building a business more from logic and more from strategy?
I will also say maybe it's when they build it out of misalignment. When people move in misalignment to their nature, what usually comes up, and what I've seen is that they might achieve their goals, and they achieve their goals. As I said, both paths they work both. Is that they don't feel content, not fulfilled. They're still trying to fill a void. They're still trying to get the approval of their parents, right? Like if we talk about like the inner child work or whatever. But like it's always a constant searching and seeking for something that kind of gives them the feeling that they're good enough. And so I think the logical path, I mean, that's very generalized. And obviously you need to go deeper into each individual for it. But very generalized, I would say most people who have been just following a path, who have been very distanced to what it feels like to be themselves, to be authentically themselves, just trying to fill, a need that wasn't met when they were younger.
There's a couple of ways I want to dissect this, because I'm thinking about clients that I've coached, and I'm thinking about creatives who lack fundamental skill sets of like how to sell, for example. Yeah. And people have a lot of resistance around that. Like, oh, I don't want to sound too salesy. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. And I could say, well, fine, just like follow your intuition, do what you want. But sometimes that's kind of what they've been doing up until now. They come to me and say, I feel like I've been winging it up until now. So sometimes what we do is put a structure around their activities. Yeah. So I guess my question is, how do you differentiate between somebody who lacks a skill set, so they could follow their intuition all day, but they're never going to make more sales just because they're bad at sales and they don't know how to communicate their value, versus somebody who has that skill set and needs to follow their intuition in order to level up?
There's something like in the spiritual community, let's say, that say, well, that's too salesy and I don't want to say it like this, I think they have forgotten that in order to birth something, we need a safe structure, a foundation. So I think we often go in extremes in a way. So you just mentioned both extremes. So they need to find a middle ground. And I think that's also part, a lot of in my work, what I've seen is like, they go from either completely like the performer, and then they're like, okay, no, now I'm following my intuition. And then zoom, they go on the other side. And I'm like, okay, I'm sitting on my meditation pillow and I'm trusting the universe will bring everything like to me. But that's not how intuition works. That's not the quote unquote strategy of intuition. That's just bypassing that you, again, like both extremes again show that there are certain needs that weren't met. Where they're not taking on full responsibility for their life and, let's say, their potential. The differentiation is they're just on the opposite side of the extreme. and they need to come back to balance. So the overly structured strategy logical person needs to learn how to trust herself more, to be able to open up, to be receptive to actually impulses and letting the voice of the intuition come up louder again, right? On the other side, they need to just understand they're not in airy fairy land, but actually they live here on this earth, and there are certain structures and systems, and that none of it is bad. So they can go from that spiritual ego part and integrate that, and also come down to, oh, actually, wait, I'm here to help this person, and I'm going to sell this. And selling, we sell all the time. Like every single day we sell something. Like I'm selling this right now theoretically by just wearing a ring, right? And people look at this, oh, where is it from? Like it's the most natural thing on earth if we think about it, that selling is so natural in a way. We don't even think about it in most cases. But when it comes down to we sell a product, a service that includes us, then we just have to face what that means, because that's completely different. When there's us, then we mistake the value of the let's say the service with self-worth, where it just doesn't have to do anything with each other. Does that answer your question?
It does. It's interesting. Like one of the reasons I love hosting podcasts and chatting to lots of different people is because you spot themes. So one of the early podcasts that I had was with a lady called Hannah Power, and she talks about these two ideas as well. I think she calls it the dreamer and the performer. And it's exactly how you just described it. So there's these kind of two extremes, and the work is about finding the balance in the middle, right? Yeah. And I think that is so important, because I think I've seen in the coaching world, people come from it where it's all about this idea of kind of spirituality and manifesting and trusting your intuition. And there's coaches out there that just talk about that, and then clients pay them a lot of money and they don't make any of it back because they don't have this fundamental skill set. They don't have the strategy. And I think the thing I love about your work, and one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you about this, is because you've done an MBA. So you have the kind of strategic and you understand the logic, but you also have a background that very much gears you towards understanding intuition, understanding yourself, and kind of diving deeper into who we are as people, and ensuring that the business that we are building is in alignment with who we are as a person, and it's not going to burn us out, basically. Yeah. So what do we need to know about you, Liza, to understand why you do the work you do today, and why you're such a big advocate of people building heart-centered businesses?
It's so funny you asked this question, because this morning everything changed. But starting with what happened before this morning. So the reason why I got into this is because I got to experience a lot of death around me. So I always could see that there's always an end to our experience. And I've always kept telling myself it's only about the quality of this life, not about the quantity, no matter how long I live, knock on wood. But I just want to be here fully. I want to be alive. I want to feel. I want to experience. I want to be in connection with other people. And then on the other side, I saw a lot of death, and then I also got encountered with so many people and my friends groups, family. They just didn't like their life, and it was very interesting, like this dynamic, to see how one person could love their life and the other person would hate their life. And like, I feel like I've always danced with the polarities and learned through the polarities, as if I lived that too. And I think because of all these incidences, I kind of lost trust in life. I lost trust in the world. And I think for me, that was definitely a starting point of like truly understanding how we are wired. How do we create thoughts? Can we stop thoughts? Can we maybe look at the thoughts? I learned how to maybe also change the attachment and the meaning attachment of thoughts. And yeah, so I think that was definitely very interesting for me. And then through my upbringing, my parents have always asked me, what do you want? What feels right? So they were very much in this state of me reflecting back on what I truly wanted. And I think that has helped me so much in my life to always come back to that voice, even though I've lost it. I mean, we all, I guess, lose it at some point in our life through teenage years, and you get disconnected and distance yourself. And then, at some point you're like, no, life was different when I was more connected to nature or would go on the walks or da-da-da-da. And then life, that voice just became stronger.
Your mum was a therapist, right?
Yeah.
And what did your dad do?
So he changed job because his sister, it's kind of an interesting story as well. They're all kind of helpless people. Anyway, his sister got very sick with an immune system sickness, and he changed his job to become a nurse when she got diagnosed. And ever since then, he was a nurse. And he also became a therapist as well at some point. So his sister died after 10 years, I think. And that's like a long time ago, 20 years ago maybe. But that's how his background kind of also shaped him. And so, yeah, then when I was little, like this is all that I can remember in a way of like going to women's circle, men's circle, wishing, well, my dad stayed at home. My mom started her businesses there, or like the therapy businesses. It was a different childhood, I guess, like growing up with a dad in a time where it wasn't normal. So people were like, what, your dad is at home? And I'm like, yeah, it's not normal. And then obviously also when you're like a bit older, you want to talk to your mom about certain things. I chose to talk to my dad about a lot of things.
You mentioned that you got very interested in the difference between people who love their lives and people that hate their lives.
Yeah.
Looking back over your life, all the people that you've met, what would you say are the things that influence the quality of people's lives and how they perceive life the most?
The quality of our life is dependent on the meaning attachment we have to our thoughts, to our perceptions, through which lens we see the world. And I think that obviously comes from our childhood. We built it through like seeing our parents do things. And yet I think there's a nuance to it that even though like you see, like if I and my brother, for example, if we were to see the same parents, we could still have a very different experience of childhood, and they also build a very different outlook to life. So that's why I'm like, yes, it always depends on our surroundings. They shape us. But ultimately, there must be something deeper within ourselves. Like I've been always a very positive person. I've always seen the positive. And I think there's also studies about this. We have positive people, then we have pessimistic people. Where's this coming from, right? There's another underlying nuance that I haven't necessarily researched on, but I see this as well. So maybe it's not a satisfying answer, but I think this is two parts. Definitely the surroundings, 100%. They create, if you have a fertile soil that you like kind of like put in, of course you're going to grow in a certain way. Of course you're going to reach out if you need help, because that's like the most normal thing to do for you, because that surround system or like the support team that you have around you is there. And at the same time, it's also that little different nuance that I haven't figured out yet, where I can say, and there's also the way that you see the world. So maybe it's a soul perspective.
Yeah. It's interesting. When I'm coaching people, the same thing can happen to two people and they will perceive that in two very different ways. One person decides that's failure, like they failed. I launched this new offer or whatever and no one said yes, or only 4 people said yes or whatever, right? The other person is like jumping for joy that even one person said yes or they got a response. And I'm like, well, what's the difference here? Because they both experienced the same thing. And like you said, it's the meaning they attach to it. It's like only 4 people said yes, therefore it must mean this thing's no good. Therefore it must mean that I'm no good. And it like when you deconstruct the thought process, that's basically what it comes down to. But I think what happens is that happens so quickly that we don't have time to understand that our thoughts are creating those emotions. It just happens. It's like that meaning is created in that instant. Yeah. And so then all of a sudden it's like, this thing happens, I feel bad. And so I think a lot of the work that we do as coaches is about deconstructing that and showing people this is actually what's happening in your brain right now. And like, I know you've trained in NLP and things like that. And CBT is very similar, where it's like, oh, I have this event that happens in my life. And then like, I decide it means this, then I create a story about it and I create a story about myself. And that makes me feel like that. What would it, like, I'm in control of all this middle bit. I'm not in control of the event. but I'm in control of everything that happens after the event. What would it be like if I consciously changed the narrative? And I know for me personally, one of the things I struggled with when I got taught that concept was it felt like I was just kind of being positive and like, oh, okay, I'm going to pretend that this thing is really good instead of really bad. And it felt very fake and disingenuous, I guess. But then when I realized that there was no such thing as like positive and negative, really, that's just a concept in our mind. Is this thing empowering me or is it disempowering me?
Yeah.
And when I looked at it through that lens, everything changed because I was like, well, it could be negative or it could be positive. It doesn't really matter. But like this meaning gives me momentum to move forward and makes me feel good. And this meaning makes me not want to do anything and feel bad. So why not just choose this meaning? Right. So the reason I'm kind of explaining this is like, you said that emotions and intuition are very different things. So can you just describe where intuition lives within the context of this kind of process that I've just unpacked?
I don't think it lives there.
Yeah. So it lives like, it's like totally separate, right?
Yes. I think the construct that you described, I think it's the model of the mind.
Yeah.
The model of how we process events, emotions. It's just how we process things. At least that's how I see it, how I teach it as well. Intuition or the heart intelligence, all these different little steps, your heart already knows that this is like, why are we even talking about this? You know, there's this instant knowing of what's right and what's wrong and why this happened or how you deal with certain things. It doesn't really like give you all the choices that the mind puts in your mind, or the noises, right? There's so many different noises that are coming up through the mind, but with your heart, with the intuition, it's just one voice. And so I like to always differentiate the mind has different processes and It's like, it's such a complex thing. Whereas the heart and the intuition is very simple. It's just one way.
Yeah.
That's it.
And I've experienced that more recently. This idea, and a lot of coaches that I've worked with who have been coaching me have said, you know, you're in your head a lot. You're in your head about everything. And I can feel the difference because it's noisy. There's a million and one things happening. So it's this thought goes to this thought, goes to here, goes to there. And it's like, Whereas the intuition, when you basically lower into the body, like you said, it's just very simple. And often it's the most uncomfortable message.
Oh yeah, 100%.
You just need to do this. And you're like, shit. That's like the hardest thing. Can I not just back up here for a bit and like try and figure it out in my head? So I'm just curious, like for people listening, what tools do you use when you're coaching your clients? If you come across somebody who is a thinker, because I know you work with creatives as well. So typically creatives are very much thinkers. They very much live in their head. How do you get people to move into their body and to listen more to their intuition?
The first thing is to understand that the mind is great. Most thinkers also start judging themselves. So what I've seen so many times is they become aware and then they judge themselves, which keeps them in the mind and not and doesn't even allow them to drop deeper into the body. So I think that's the first in quote unquote battle, to truly allow the mind to repeat the patterns, to repeat the stories until you're so sick of them, because you know that they're not your stories anymore, but not sick of them in a way of like you judging yourself that again and this thought again and because that just keeps you always stuck in the mind. And so I think this is number one, like become your best friend.
Right. So it's like the thinking about the thinking needs to be positive, like almost coming from a place of compassion.
Yeah, 100%.
Right.
Be compassionate with yourself and be respectful. I mean, if I were to tell you all my thoughts, let's say, you know, you wouldn't be like, why are you thinking this? Like, you know, it's like you would maybe say, why are you thinking this? Because I see you like you have something encouraging to say. But most of us, very often, especially the thinkers, have something negative to say about themselves, which again distance themselves from who they truly are. So I would say this is pretty much 99% of the times that would be the way. Start becoming your best friend through sharing compassion, and also share yourself, or like the way that I have started doing this was like just be humorous. It's like, I had this thought. again, great. Like I would just make fun of it. It's like, it's just a game. So why do I take myself so seriously? I don't need to take myself so seriously. I don't take so many things too seriously anymore. But when I did, again, there was just this little, like I didn't have much space to actually explore because I didn't give myself that space because I was so strict with myself. I'm like, no, this is how it needs to be done. And you just have to let it go. And it's not about letting go. That's the next thing. It's never about letting go. It's about integrating it. So if we tell our mind, let this go, it creates in our nervous system more like fight or flight. We can't be who we are, and then we will change. And when we change, something bad might happen, right? It's like all these stories. So we're still up in the mind, but all these different, let's say, security systems of the mind, they need to be kind of like checked in order for us to drop deeper. So with thinkers, I like to deconstruct the process of, well, what their mind does to their story and to their life and to their future, so that they understand. Because thinkers need to understand. Because if not, even if I tell them just drop into the body, let's go do a heart meditation, or let's come back to a decision that you made from your intuition. What was the voice like? Okay, this is the voice. So always just check in whenever you have to do something. Is this the voice, right? It's so easy. But with a thinker, they will overthink that. They will say, that's waste of my time. I need to do this.
Yeah, because there's like a protector in the brain that doesn't want us. And I find usually, I don't know if you've done much around like internal family systems or like parts work, but usually that is, I call it my thinking part. And my thinking part wants to understand the logic, and it wants to figure out the danger, and it wants to analyze. Like that's its job, like analyze the situation, analyze the danger. Should we be doing this? And basically what I'm hearing, so correct me if I'm wrong, is you kind of need to satisfy that, and you need to create a safe space for it. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna just chill for a bit, and then we can kind of see what happens from here. Because until you do that, then it's not going to ever stop thinking and analyzing and allow you to kind of move into your body and into your intuition, right?
Yeah, and when you said chill, it's not about chilling. It's about building simultaneously a pathway that feels safe for them to move. So all of this can happen at the same time, following your intuition while satisfying the need to be safe. Because it's always about safety. And I think one question that I often ask myself whenever I went on a pathless path, I would always just ask myself, am I going to die? Is this that dramatic? Because my mind can be that dramatic. And I'm like, is this going to lead to death? Yes or no? No? Okay, great. Then we do it. And then as the fears come up, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to die doing this. I'm not going to die saying yes to a podcast, right? Like theoretically.
Yeah.
I just think that our brain is just outdated. And the way that our society, coming back to what we spoke about at the beginning, our society, though, has programmed us that logic is the only way. And it has kept us safe. And that's why it's so ingrained in who we are. That's why we do the things as they have been doing things, I don't know, like the past, I don't know how many years. But your brain hasn't really evolved since, I don't know, we were afraid of a bear coming up next to us, and but we don't live in these times anymore. So we must, I feel like it's like a must actually. And I never say we must do this or anything, because we can do anything. But it's such a privilege to understand that. And then rise above that. Rise above that noise in your mind that keeps you stuck in your mind. Because it's just a circus. And it's like, somewhere I have read this quote, I don't remember where and when, but something like we keep buying a ticket to this circus even though we don't want to attend it. And so we must stop buying that ticket. And that is a conscious choice. So it's like awareness is key, number one, but then it's a conscious choice to go there again and again and again because it's familiar, or to choose to build something else, to choose a different path. And yes, of course, at the beginning, it doesn't feel safe, but we must walk it again in order to become more familiar with it. With some of my clients, I have this metaphor, and it's kind of for the reticular activating system in our brain as well. When we walk a path, we always say, follow the path of least resistance, right? It's like the best path because it's just, there's no resistance. So this is usually though when we're in our comfort zone. So we follow that, let's say old pattern that isn't really serving us to living out our full potential, but we're following it because it's easy. So the metaphor is like as if you were standing in front of a nettle field. I mean, you don't want to walk through it because it's going to sting you. Of course, you're not going to walk through it. But what if you walk that path, there's something much greater for you out there. You don't know that yet, but you have to walk it once. And you walk and it hurts. That's the discomfort. But at the end, you already see there's something really cool happening. So you walk it once, it hurts. You walk it twice, it still hurts a little bit. 3 times, still hurting. And at some point, there's this path, and around you are the nettles, but there's this path. So a new pathway has formed in your mind. So a new pattern has been kind of like ingrained in your being. So you walk this path and you see the old path. Like years later, you're like, I walked that path before. Why would I ever choose that? Because it's so unknown then and so kind of not ridiculous, but you're like, why would I ever have bought into this idea? And I feel like this has helped me and many clients of mine to understand that, yes, it's okay that it hurts at some point or at the beginning to use a path that you don't see necessarily because you've never been exposed to it.
People have got to believe though that like walking through the stinging nettles is going to get them something exponentially better than walking the path without the stinging nettles. So how do you help people to have that faith? Like how do you get people to buy into life is exponentially better if you walk through these stinging nettles versus just walking down the path that doesn't have the stinging nettles?
First, I guess they're already living their worst case scenario. I do believe like right now I'm living my worst case scenario and I like my life. But this is based on all the beliefs that I have about my life, about my business, about the way that I've built it. And I'm not where I want to be yet. And that's kind of could be the same for my clients. They're not where they want to be. That's the reason why they came to me. So they've tried so many different pathways that people have told them, this works, because they have seen that, but it's not their path. And I think for me, it's just anchoring in the trust that, and again, trust happens through movement. It doesn't happen like a kid doesn't like trust itself by just like, I can walk now. No, it needs to learn it. And I think trust is the very same. And so is faith. We need to experience certain things so that, and that is the same with reprogramming. We need to experience certain experiences in order for it to actually touch ourselves within, that we notice, because reprogramming happens through 2 things, I guess. Repetition is number 1 key, or an emotional, very intense experience. And so if we combine that of like, I'm not saying like leap there and do this, if I don't see like that they're not safe within themselves, first creating the safety while then exposing themselves to things that they would have not done at the beginning of the coaching. So let's say they didn't want to sell anything. Well, then we have a challenge and you have to sell certain things and get them out of their comfort zone. And as with everything, they just have to get out of it for a second, break the pattern. And that already creates something. And the more you do it and the more you actually expose, like the more I expose my clients to these situations, the more it builds trust within themselves. Not trust within me. They have trust, like that's why they chose to work with me, but trust within themselves. And through that, it does get exponentially better.
Why does trusting your intuition and following the path that is aligned with your personality involve walking through stinging nettles? Why do we have to go through that pain in order to get the outcome?
I guess it's just the thing that we spoke about at the beginning, because we haven't learned it. I had to relearn that. So if we had a world where everyone would follow their intuition, and then out of a sudden we had like, a crisis, and everyone was like, no, but the mind, that's the way. Then we would have to train our mind or train our being to come back to what it looks like to follow logic. So, and that would sting too. And That's why it's like, how would I ever know what's better, or what's the right way? I don't know. I definitely don't know what's the right way. Is intuition the right way, or is logic the right way? What I have found is just that both ways work, but they both make people feel differently. And you said something beautiful earlier. Is it empowering me or is it not? And I found that following the logical path has often brought people to burnout, to doubting themselves, to they're just rushing through life. They don't take it in. They don't feel content at the end of the day, don't feel successful at the end of the day. They can have all the money in the world and yet it's not good enough. They have the millions of followers and yet they don't have a community. They don't trust anyone around them. You know what? That's, to me, in my perception of reality, that's quite miserable. I would not want to live that life.
Yeah. I think ultimately what we're talking about as well is fulfillment.
Right.
Because I've experienced this in two different ways. I've experienced the first thing you said, where you have all the external trappings of success and you build the things that your logical mind tells you is going to make you happy, and then you're not happy. And then you also have where you judge yourself for not being happy.
Yeah.
Because you're like, who am I to not be happy about having all these things that I said that I wanted? And that even puts you in a deeper cycle.
Yeah.
Because then you're like, not only am I not happy, but I'm not happy about the fact I'm not happy.
Yeah.
And it's like a double whammy, which is really interesting. I think one of the things that I just want to highlight, I guess, is this idea of following your intuition and this idea of things that come up from listening to your intuition and how it takes so much courage to actually follow that. Because a lot of the time, not only is that voice like uncomfortable, i.e. I shouldn't be with this person, or I fire this client, or whatever, like that's what your intuition is telling you. So that's scary in itself, but logically it doesn't make sense. Like there's no real reason to fire this client. They're paying us a decent amount every month, like they pay on time, yada, yada. But something about this is like creating this emotional stress. Basically, it just doesn't feel right. And it's nagging at me, it's gnawing. And I believe a lot of people, that is what makes people sick. Because there's this like emotion that's trying to shout at us. Or it's not an emotion, because you said there's a difference between emotion and intuition.
Yeah.
But the intuition is saying, do this, and you're ignoring your intuition. So maybe it's expressing itself as an emotion, and that's how it's trying to get your attention, right? And so I know I've experienced that. So how do you coach people through that? Like, how do you coach people to the point where you just get them to take that first step? Because the reason I'm asking this is because in my experience, it's usually like a big decision. Like my intuition is saying, quit this job. Like you told me a story about where you're like, I quit a job within 3 days or whatever. Like you started this job and then you quit it in 3 days.
Yeah.
And like, I've had things where it's like, you date someone and like on paper, they're perfect. Right. And like, they're great and you have fun, but there's just something that just like doesn't feel right about this. But that's like a really big decision to turn around to someone and say, I'm really sorry, like this just doesn't feel right. And they're like, oh, why? What is it? I don't know. My intuition is just telling me it's not the right thing.
Yeah.
But like, I know people that do it. Like literally someone the other day, I did a pre-interview for my podcast and we were both like, yeah, let's do this. Great. And then like an hour later, she messaged me and she was like, oh, actually, I don't want to do this anymore. Like my intuition is telling me that like, this is not the right thing. And I'm like, respect for that, but I really struggle with that. So for the people listening that maybe have identified that intuition and it's telling them to do something really scary, like where do you start if a client comes to you with a situation like that and it just feels like too much of a big leap?
As you were speaking, I thought about myself as well. I left my relationship of five and a half years because of that. It's like everything was perfect. Penthouse apartment in Oslo, like good job. Like we lived a great life, traveling all the time. We had such a good life. And something within me was like, that's not it. Another thing was me firing clients. I cried. I cried so many nights because I was like, but they're great. Why would I do this? And it just felt like it was time. And I have so many examples in my life that I can share theoretically, where I had to follow this feeling. But I give myself space. It doesn't need to be like a decision. It's interesting, like for example, with my relationship, I knew this before it would happen because I had that feeling, but I just couldn't. Just like, no, like you love this person. Like, no, we've been together through so much. We've supported each other, all the stories. And then just one random Thursday morning or whenever we talked, and then it was just done. Next day I called my parents, said, you guys come to Oslo. You have to pick up my stuff. I'm going to South Africa now. And so, it's like, the reason why I'm sharing this is because sometimes we know, and it's so clear, especially like when you have trained the voice of intuition, then it becomes so crystal clear and you can be like, no, it's not right. Like now I just sense a person and I know what's right and wrong. I know this, I sense the room. I know what's good for me and what's not good for me, what's aligned or what's not aligned. And I have trained myself to be very religious about it. Like just follow your gut, follow your intuition, follow that heart voice. But I also gave myself space to make a big decision. So I would never rush anyone into a decision. I would never say, now just quit your job and start your business. No. Like, if you're not, again, secure within yourself, at least a little bit, this could go wrong. So I wouldn't do that. I always want to put myself in their shoes as well. But especially with this, I would help them train the voice of intuition. So very often, I have not met yet one person that has not yet encountered at least one time where they had a connection to the intuition. Meaning I would probably ask them about a certain event, a certain decision they had to make that didn't make any sense. Usually it's like this. It doesn't make sense. You make that decision and somehow it turns out to be very good. And no one, like everyone's going to be like, why was it good? And I think that's the first touch point, to get them to remember how it felt like, because it's a feeling. So it's a frequency in your body. It's a feeling. So you can definitely tell, in this, it was scary, but somehow in me, there was something much bigger. Like it felt more, let's say, clear. Whereas oftentimes with the mind, again, it's more chaotic. It's distracting you. You're like rushing. But with intuition was understanding the differences, and we can very often remember the difference by just coming back to different events, decisions where we had to follow, or we did follow our intuition. We never called it like this. We just called it, maybe that was random. Well, I just did that and somehow this worked out. So I think that is something that I would train before they actually take that step.
Okay. So knowing that is intuition and not just a random thought.
Yeah.
Because that's quite an important distinction, right?
Yeah.
It's like, that it's just a random thought, I should leave this person. So, okay, well, how do I know whether to listen to that or not? Because we're trying to train our brain to not listen to our thoughts, to not show up to the circus, because it gives us lots of crazy thoughts.
Yeah.
So the first part is actually like understanding the difference between those two voices.
And that's based on the feeling. So it always comes with an underlying feeling. Every thought comes with an underlying feeling. I will say I do think intuition and the heart, there are, I guess they also involve thoughts, but again, the feeling of the thought is going to be different. So we're not having a random impulse, start this business and do this. And out of a sudden, like Sarah Blakely, start this business, heart whispers, cut your, tights. And then now you have Spanx and now you're the billionaire, whatever, right? It's like, that's kind of the story of her that she often gives. And I think that's very interesting because she's a living, breathing example of that, following her intuition, following the quote unquote random impulse, but following it religiously, even though everyone else thought she was crazy. And so there's so many other great examples that have built multiple million businesses in any other space as well. So there are already examples, but I think it's to understand what is the difference in the thought. Yes, does it empower me or does it not? And also though, understanding, is it calm? Is it one voice? Is it clear or is it chaotic? Is it kind of like coming as a storm? And I think intuition just cuts through any bullshit there's that your mind tries to keep you kind of like tries to keep you busy. It's just thinking, not doing.
Yeah. Lisa, if people want to find out more about your work and they want to go deeper into this idea of following your intuition, where can they go?
Trust your intuition.
Just trust your intuition.
Yeah, just
it'll come to you.
You will know.
Yeah.
Do you mean like how they can connect with me?
Yeah.
I guess you can probably link them to my Instagram. I usually am more connected there, and my website. I have a course that's about intuition as well, that talks about different thoughts and exercises. But yeah, I will probably just just follow examples that you've, like just right now with Sarah Blakely as an example. Maybe just listen to some of her interviews, get inspired. But yeah, if you want to connect with me, just send me a message on Instagram and we have a little bit of an exchange.
Love it. Thank you so much. Thank you for being a guest on the Creative Courage podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're
really
welcome.
Appreciate it.